I was carrying around the witch wound, but more specifically, the sisterhood wound. And I want to name that with us all because one of the wounds that I think we don't recognize that we have is we're frightened of other women. We're frightened to be in our power because if we're in our power, it means another woman can't be. That's the message we've been given. We're frightened that if we step into our full beauty, that we're going to be judged for it, not by the men, by the women. We're frightened of being stabbed in the back by them, by being betrayed by them. Why is that? That's because we've internalized the wound that basically said we had no power unless we were married to a rich man, ladies. And if we needed to get that rich man, we needed to be the prettiest, smartest, most beautiful, most erudite, play the piano, crochet, whatever. We had to be able to do all the things to prove that we were worthy of his attention.
And once you got him, you better be sure no other bitch gets a hold of him.
Exactly.
You gotta fight them all off.
Exactly, which is what's in the culture. So that's another way that this plays out. And I think for us to realize that that's what that is, that's not inherent. We're not inherently trying to undo each other and hate on each other. We're actually more powerful. And this is the really interesting part.
I'm Layla Martin. I'm your host of This Tantric Life. This podcast is for you to learn about and be able to use the incredibly powerful system of Tantra in your life. I have been teaching and studying classical and neo-Tantra for over 20 years. And when you apply that to sex, love, and relationships, as I love to do, you end up having conscious relationships, the deepest, most epic and magical sex, and the kind of intimacy that you get to be grateful for on your deathbed.
Hi, and welcome to This Tantric Life. I'm your host, Layla Martin. I am here with Elayne Kalila Doughty, one of the most embodied and potent high priestesses on the earth at this time that I have ever come across. I met her in my empty bathtub. We'll get into that in a minute. She's an ordained priestess, a licensed therapist, and focalizer of the 13 Moon Mystery School and the Rosa Mystica Mystery School. She trains women into their high priestess power. She's the dean and founder of the Priestess Presence School and the Sacred Arts and Temple, which serves a massive sisterhood all around the world. She's the best-selling co-author of The Sacred Call of the Ancient Priestess, author of the Magdalene Rose Oracle, and she is the host of the Red Podcast, a place for bold, inspired, courageously outrageous, and just a tad bit naughty women leaders to gather. So I'm so excited to welcome her. She's going to show you how to walk this path of being a modern priestess with even more beauty, even more spiritual depth, and an even deeper ability to truly show yourself to the world so you can be what you were born to be. So welcome, Elayne Kalila. I love that I first encountered you, and actually the last time I encountered you, it's been a while since we've actually seen each other, was when I was receiving really sacred sessions from you in my bathtub. On Venice Beach, because, early entrepreneur, like building your dreams kind of story. When me and Andrew first moved from Asia back to California, and we lived in Venice Beach, and we didn't want to spend very much money. So we had literally a studio apartment. And so we worked and we cooked. We did everything in this like one space, which was really intense. And so to get a moment of privacy, I both did my VITA coaching practices in the bathtub. So I literally like masturbate and like be like communing with higher realms. And like, there's this one practice where you like masturbate to yourself dying and watching your own funeral. So you can like make this like orgasmic peace with your death. So that bathtub was like so sacred to me. And I would sit in the bathtub, as you pointed out, while it was empty and do my sessions with you just like curled up with my laptop.
Oh my goodness. That is such a good memory that you were sharing that with me. And I just sparked it into me. And I was like, wait a minute, but weren't you in the bathtub with no water in it? Like,
no water.
It was like just your sanctuary. That was the only privacy you had.
Yeah.
We do what we have to do.
Exactly. Yep. Early on, I was like, I'm going to build this no matter what. If I got to save a bunch of money on rent, so be it.
Oh my goodness. Well, amazing. I'm so honored to be here with you, love, and to be tracking all of these years that I've been part of your growth and watching you bring what you're bringing into the world and just celebrating you. So it's an honor to be here. Thanks for the invitation, love.
So I am so moved by how you embody High Priestess. So you are a priestess of the Magdalene Mysteries and that lineage school. So I'd love to hear more. What is it to be a high priestess? But like, take me into the inner world.
Yeah.
You just said a prayer before we began. And I can feel, I'm sure you can feel when someone is connecting, right? What is that connection of high priestess? And what does that feel like inside of you?
Oh, what a beautiful question. I have to feel it for a moment before I even speak it. So the high priestess, or the priestess as an archetype, has been with us throughout time, like for millennia, thousands and thousands of years. This is not a new archetype of the feminine consciousness. This is a really ancient archetype. And she is the connection between our physical body, this human body, and our spiritual being. She is the conduit. I feel like she's the channel. She's the one who connects us to the marriage between the divinity and the humanity. And she is the one who's able to walk in both worlds and be the sacred marriage of those two worlds together. So why is she arising right now in our consciousness, I think, is a really fascinating question to bring in, particularly amongst women. And you'll see priestess and this word all over the place now, whereas about 10 years ago, you didn't see it at all.
Totally.
At all, right? We've really seen this incredible resurgence of this archetype and this frequency. And I really think that she's rising up within us, Layla, because I think it's time for that divine feminine return, for the return of our knowing, our gnosis, to use that word, of how to connect the spiritual and the physical back together. They should never have been separated. In fact, we know in our truth, they are not separate. We are both. And we have many sacred technologies, of which you know many and I know many, of ways and means to us actually awakening that within ourselves. So I see the priestess everywhere. I see her in every vocation, every occupation, every profession. And she is the one who is bringing back the symbolic realm, the intuitive realm, the psychic gifts, the deep listening, the ability to affect the space with her presence. And if I were to take you inside of that, what I would truly say is, as priestess, I have trained my consciousness to become still and empty enough that when I walk into a space, I can fill it with the presence of whatever face of the goddess I am calling forward through me.
I'm here to let you know that if you want to stay connected to my teachings and if you want to support this podcast, the best way to do it is to sign up for my email list. Email list sounds old school, and yet it is where I share my most intimate teachings, the path, process, heartbreak, and triumph of my life, and so much of the content that I make for you on a regular basis. So the way you get on the email list is by heading over to laylamartin.com, put your email address into any of the boxes. You can also sign up for cool practices like sex magic or energy orgasm, totally free. Heading on over to laylamartin.com, signing up with your email address. This supports the podcast. It supports this entire work and is the #1 way for you to receive the highest teachings of this path. So what are the faces of the goddess?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm sitting looking at one right now. And anyone who's listening here, you are all faces of the goddess, my darlings, and the gods. All of us are that. We've forgotten how to see each other that way. It's like over the last few thousand years, we've been all through this awful, patriarchal, toxic shaming of our connection to the divine. And that's been made something that's not just dangerous, but heretical, right? And we're still recovering from that. It's not like we don't still have fundamentalists on this planet who would like to probably burn me at the stake, burn you at the stake, metaphorically or practically in the world. And I know you've had a lot of that in your life, and I have too been the object of a lot of projection. And so when we step into these faces of the goddess, we're doing something revolutionary, evolutionary, rebellious, and powerful. What we're saying is, as the female form stepping into the face of the goddess, we're saying it's time for us to reclaim our connection to the divine within us, whether it's the great mother, the goddess of compassion, or Kali Ma, or the muse, or the goddess of love, or the wise woman. These are all faces of the divine feminine that exist in every culture, if we go back into the history of the spirituality of the goddess, which thank goodness many, many people have done at this point to trace that history, or as I say, that her story, because that's really what it is, then we see in every culture, there have been depictions of the feminine in positions of not just power, but beauty and grace, wildness, sovereignty, edginess, destruction, death and birth and rebirth. Like that is the world of the feminine mysteries. And I believe that it's really powerful for us as women to remember who we actually are. And that is why the goddesses and the faces of the goddesses are starting to return to us. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing that's coming to me as you're saying all of this is when I watched Wonderwoman.
Ah, yes. Perfect.
And that opening scene.
Yes.
When they are proud and powerful and charging. I think they were on horses. I don't know. I watched it a while ago.
Yes.
And I remember like subconsciously,
Ooh, yes.
I didn't have a thought. I just started sobbing because I'd never seen a depiction of woman so fierce, so proud, and also so hot. Like so feminine and so like, oof. And I get a similar, right? That's one of the only times I saw that in a Hollywood movie, and I don't watch that many movies, but I get a similar feeling when some of these ancient cultures, when I read of them or feel them. And one of them is definitely the Mediterranean cultures. Right. So around Phoenicia, which and I think now is Lebanon and parts of the Levant and Crete and all around the Mediterranean. I actually read this very I think it was like a British history book or whatever. And it talked about like 3,000 years ago. So we're talking like around 1000 BC. Those caves all around the Mediterranean were used for ancient priestess temple worship and rites. And me and Emily went to one of the primordial caves in the center of Crete that had been used. I think it had been used ceremonially for like 15,000 years, like really ancient. And cultures of Anatolia, right? Ancient Turkey, what is now modern day Turkey as well, worshiping Kibele, this wild mountain goddess of ferocity, right? She sits on a throne with lions on either side. Like she's flanked by this power that reminds me of Durga, right? And in the Hindu traditions, and if you go back before lots of the invasions and colonization of India, which has happened in so many waves. And what we forget is colonization is super old. So there were waves of patriarchal colonization, 1500 BC happening in Europe, happening in Turkey, happening in India, right? That actually started to decimate these traditions. And when I connect to the archetype of those practices, right? Many people, I think, really connect to the priestesses of ancient Egypt, but they were everywhere, right? They were literally everywhere. And they conducted these incredible rites and rituals of divine communion. And they served their communities because, as you're saying, they were the ones who I think create external and internal space where we are so conscious that divine and human are no longer split. And so life becomes ritual. And we also want touch points in our lives for things to, let's say, become more ritual, to be even more connected to the divine. And then other times we live our lives, right? And that's how most humanity flows, is in and out. And part, I think, of being a healthy human is to have that spiritual connection and to have a place where you go and connect to ritual. That, as you alluded to, got incredibly co-opted by people who, I can't say that their religious beliefs are right or wrong, but what I know was wrong was telling everyone that they had to believe what they believed, or else they would be killed.
Yes.
This is wrong, no matter what you're teaching.
We will agree on that.
Let's not torture people for their religious beliefs and practices.
Can we not?
Yeah, let's just not do that.
Yeah.
So in that, I think what most of us forget is prior to witch burning, right? Which was the last, 1,000 years, 1,500 years even, there was a whole wave of global shutdown of priestess practices that happened even more ancient than that. It was more like 3,500 years ago that started to shut down the temples, started to silence the priestesses. And so much came along with that because at the time, the priestesses were landholders. They had their own wealth. And so one of the reasons I learned that the Bible admonishes so heavily women who have braids in their hair and wear gold is because that's what the high priestesses did.
Exactly.
They adorned themselves. They had wealth. And so for us to reclaim what has been threatened and silenced with violence and rape, honestly, and horrible torture and death, to reclaim that is no small thing. And I think every woman feels that in some way, shape, or form, or a person of any gender who's stepping back into their spiritual sovereignty beyond what society told us was okay. So I just want to honor and acknowledge everyone in that path, and also you and everything that you did to make your way to this level of empowerment. Because it's such a deep process.
It is. And what you're speaking to, thank you for contexting that, because really, if we look back through history, 30,000 years BCE was when the Venus of Willendorf was found, right? So that's 32,500 years ago. That's an incredibly big period of time for our little human minds to get hold of. Yeah. We had evidence of goddess culture, goddess worshippers, priestesses who were highly trained and initiated, who had their own wealth, who were not married, who were not mothers, who were not part of the culture in that way, but had a specific position in the culture and their communities to do with the health and well-being of their communities, right? So when we think about that, we think about this entire her story and the little blip of the last 1,500 years to 2,000 years, the demise, the real attack of that, the real fundamentalist attack on the feminine, and where that has led us in terms of the ravages of late stage patriarchy and what we're really looking at in our world is the imbalance between the masculine and feminine. And we know this. We know that this isn't working. We know that having women not be in positions of spiritual power and spiritual leadership doesn't work. So we are here to reclaim that now. These ancient traditions live within us. They're in our DNA. They may have been lost in terms of oral lineages that got cast out because the women who were carrying them were killed, or they were silenced, or they were put underground, literally. But that memory lives in all of us. And I know that because through my own practice of searching for lineage, roots, whether that's my ancestral lineage, my blood lineages, which, by the way, 70% Celtic, and that's where I come from, the UK, right? Really grounded into that lineage and into the tradition of the Avalonian priestesses, the priestesses who were the Druid priestesses as well as the Magdalene. I think it's upon all of us to trace our ancestral lineages and to do that piece of work. That's become really clear in the last few years, especially for those of us who are sitting here in white skin, who are white people, to remember that we have a lineage, we have roots. I'm wanting to say to all the women who are listening to this and all the men, you have spiritual roots. They may have been buried and hidden under colonization that you yourself experienced. And certainly all of the medicine women in your lineage probably went underground. But if you scratch the surface of yourself and your history, your lineage, you're going to find them. My grandmother, Olive, who raised me, my amazing grandmother, Olive, 5 foot tall from the East End of London, Cockney as Cockney could be. What did she used to do with me on a Saturday afternoon? She'd go, do you want to read the tea leaves? She'd get her cups out. We'd have tea. She'd make a proper cup of tea out of the nice teapot that was only reserved for this. And we'd do the thing and we'd twist the thing and we'd read from the tea leaves, right? What was she doing? Prophecy. What was she doing? Oracling, looking for the signs and the symbols and the shapes. This is something we have done forever, my darlings. So reclaiming it is an act of revolution and evolution of the feminine. It is time for us to do this. It is our time. Look what's happening on the world stage right now. It's happening. Women are stepping into positions of power and they're remembering. And when I say that is in your DNA, I want to say something else about that is there are so many ways that we can access into the remembrance of who we are. We have to be willing to stop looking out there to the world outside to tell us who we are We have to take our attention and the power of our consciousness. This is the priestess arts. Turn it inside and start to look within to the garden and sanctuary of beauty that lives within us. And we have to start to come to know it, see it, feel it, experience it, taste it, open up to this Garden of Eden that lives within us, that has everything within it that we're here to remember. It's encoded in us. And that's the piece that we've been told that we don't have access to. That was a nice little thing that they put in there a few hundred years ago when they said, oh, you can't actually access the divine without going to the priest, darling. You must go to the church and it is only the priest. Well, guess what? That's not true. And I want to bow to the work that you're doing in the world, sweetheart, which is so much to do with this and the lineages that you hold that bring us into a state where we can actually go, oh, I remember. I remember who I am.
I'm excited to take a moment and share with you about the VITA coaching certification. This program has been around for almost 10 years, and it is my highest offering. The sexual wellness industry is forecast to be a $125 billion industry by the year 2026. Why is this? Because people are more ready than ever to express their sexuality and build deeply connected, meaningful relationships, and also, obviously, to have the most outrageous orgasms and erotic experiences of their lives. But most people are never taught how to do any of this, how to have extraordinary relationships, how to have the sex they really crave. They're looking for qualified, confident professionals to teach them. And my VITA Sex, Love, and Relationship Coaching Certification is a powerful 1-year professional certification that's helped more than 2,000 coaches make their way to becoming incredibly successful and highly paid sex, love, and relationship professionals. But this program doesn't just train you in every aspect of the coaching process so that you can build a successful online business. VITA Coaching will also walk you through the personal transformation of a lifetime because the best coaches have done the work themselves. You'll discover so many transformative techniques like breathwork, meditation practices, self-pleasuring tools that you'll apply to your own life first, and then you'll use these same proven tools and techniques to get laser-focused results for your clients. We also hold an exclusive live embodiment retreat just for VITA coaching students and alumni every year. In this retreat, you'll experience 7 days of live teaching with the VITA teachers and I, and really refine your skills as a sex, love, and relationship coach. So if you feel called to claim your spot in this multi-billion-dollar industry and transform not only your own life, but the life of so many others around the world, you can join me inside the VITA coaching certification now at laylamartin.com/VITA coaching. That's laylamartin.com/VITA coaching, VITA. This discussion of us returning to our lineage and our roots, and specifically for white women to understand this.
Yeah.
One of the pain bodies that I've seen in white women is that because these pagan ancestral root lineages were decimated all over Europe, and usually more than 1,000 years ago, like really decimated.
Yep.
And then an agenda was put in place where the religious traditions were generally highly toxic to a woman's well-being.
Absolutely.
I find that when white women go to engage in spirituality, that deep trauma body that's so deep, most of them don't even realize they have it. That's so bound up with fear and terror and threat of violence against them expressing their spiritual truth, causes them, I find whenever people have a hidden pain body, they act in dissociated or disconnected ways. And so one of the things that I've wanted to say to white women who I see cause some deeply unconscious pain when they're interacting with other people's traditions is because they don't understand reverence and connection to their own root lineages. And in fact, when I look into the pain body, it's almost like it's been erased. They'll often act like hungry ghosts or just straight capitalists with other people's traditions, because they haven't connected to the preciousness of their roots. And so one of the things that I found is that white women can be very fragile and very scared around spirituality. And one of the things I really encourage is for them to reclaim, restore, and reconnect to their root lineages. Because I feel once you do that, you start to understand the preciousness of other people's. And while there are some traditions who are very explicit, like we don't want white people practicing, or we don't want people from other cultures practicing our tradition, I found that most spiritual traditions around the world will welcome people of any race and background if they are sincere seekers, if they are reverential, if they are respectful. And I think where this misunderstanding and pain happens that I've seen is that white women specifically don't even recognize that they had this trauma, spiritual trauma inside of them that they're still carrying.
Yeah.
And there was tremendous, overwhelming pain towards people of color because of white people carrying that spiritual trauma and spiritual violence, honestly, codes and belief systems that cause them to be horrifically violent towards people of color. Oftentimes that violence happened more recently. So people of color, not always, but often have a deeper connection to those root lineages that existed before white colonialism. And so sometimes a white-bodied person feels like those are their only sources of wisdom. But also, if they're still carrying this deeply embodied pain that they haven't themselves resolved, I find it's very hard for them to engage with any other lineage respectfully and with the level of reverence that specifically people of color are usually asking for if they are welcome and invited into the tradition. So I haven't seen that named as much. It's just something I studied in the trauma field and in the pain body field. And I speak to it not to center the white experience over anybody else's experience, but because I see that sort of unconsciousness to that wound it actually does unconscious harm to others when their traditions are so precious.
Yeah, that's so important for us to sit and contemplate that for a moment, right? Because what I would name it as, and I work with it a lot because I train priestesses, right? So that's what I do in the world, is train women to become ceremonialists, to become priestesses, and to do the inner work that's necessary to recohere their own spiritual lineage. So this is something I really deeply see. And prior to that, I worked in the field of trauma recovery for a long time with women survivors of what I can only say as deep ravages of a colonial, patriarchal objectification and hatred of the feminine body and colonization of the feminine body. So we're talking about a lot of layers of wounding here that live not just within us individually, but live in us collectively. This is the collective trauma body of the feminine. And it exists, it's real. You scratch the surface of most women's experience when they come back into contact with any kind of aspect of their power, their womb, their breasts, their yonis, their bodies. You're going to find this. And I identify it within my work as the priestess wound or the witch wound, right? And this is a real thing. This isn't made up. This isn't something we've conjured. It is the result of systematic abuse, systematic undermining and systematic disempowerment of the feminine over the last few thousand years. And when you do that to any group, you end up internalizing that. And what you're talking about is the internalized oppression and patriarchy that we have put inside of ourselves as like a toxin, like a poison, that we don't even realize because we're swimming in that water. So the first thing we do as a priestess when we start to train as an initiate, and this is where I think the mystery school traditions are really needed and why they're all coming back and why there are so many of us who are on this path, is because the first thing that we do is start to look at our shadow material. We start to look at that which has been unlooked at, that which is hidden within us that needs to be alchemized or revealed, so that we can become more of who we actually are and not operate from these pseudo selves, this part of self that's disconnected from the roots of our lineages, both into the earth, but also into the cosmos in both directions. And what I find is, and it's interesting you brought this up today, because I've been doing a lot of work on this year, really with my community, and really listening to what is the what are some of the most common things that women come to me with? And the number one thing is that they are terrified about coming out of the closet and naming themselves as a priestess or a spiritual woman, or the fact that they read tarot cards, or whatever it is, like whatever esoteric practice that they're involved in. They are terrified because they feel like that puts a target on their backs.
Yes.
And what does that show us? And I get total chills when I say this, Layla, because I'm going to be honest with you, and I know you know this because you've been walking around in this archetype as a tantrika, but as a woman who's self-declared in my power, as a woman who doesn't have children, as a woman who's going towards my 60s now, who doesn't have children and is in my power and hasn't chosen to go down the normal route, I threaten just by being me. And that's what's real. Second thing is, I know what it feels like to have a target on my back because I feel it. And I've had to do my own work in leading all these other women to heal their trauma. You better believe I have had to go deep and dark down into my nervous system where I feel like a hunted woman. I feel like a woman. Oh, my hairs on the back of my neck had just gone up and I could cry. I could felt that feeling of what it feels like to be one who is being preyed upon. And that, I believe, is in every one of us who's in a female body, whether we are conscious of it or not, because the subspecies called feminine, called women, has been, doesn't matter where you've been on this planet, you have been at the mercy of this colonial power. Now, is it different between women of color and white women? Of course it is. Of course, for women of color, they have their own experiences, even more horrific. And like you said, more recent. The witch hunt against them has been way more recent than it was for us. But we all have this work to do to heal this wound within ourselves that silences us, that makes us feel stupid, that makes us feel worthless, that makes us feel like we don't have a voice and don't have anything important to say. That means that we're scared that if we stand out, we're going to be judged and shamed and called crazy, that we're going to be locked up for being crazy, which, by the way, we were. Even as recent as the 1900s, the 1920s, the 1930s, women were still being locked up for being hysterical, which, by the way, means you have a wandering womb. What an interesting term of phrase that is, that you could be. I have a theory about that, by the way. Let me tell you what my theory is.
Tell us the theory.
My theory, you're gonna like this. My theory about this, just to bring a bit of light relief into what is a very heavy subject, darlings, is this. I've been going through 10 years of menopause, perimenopause, they call it. They might as well call it the menopause odyssey. That's what it is. Okay, from 46 through 57, I've been in the menopause odyssey. I'm finally over the hump of it. What I can tell you about menopausal women and those who are going through the perimenopausal phase, who are really in it, is that shift can make you feel really crazy because you suddenly lose all of your coordinate points and you suddenly are thrown asunder and you are not anchored and you are changing and you are not caring what people think of you and you are not caring what you're saying or who you're upsetting. You start to not care about those things. Guess what the culture did with women who didn't care about those things, who weren't playing nice? They'd lock them up. She's hysterical. She's crazy. She's speaking her mind. She's not saying, oh, of course, I'll do that for you. She's not putting up with her drunkard husband. She's not putting up with the abuse. So we're living in a world where, this is really recent. We're talking the 1920s, 30s, 40s, women were being put into asylums. So is it any wonder that we still hold that wound? Of course we do. We're barely scratching the surface of connecting into that trauma. So we have some work to do, ladies. We have some work to do. And it's not all heavy lifting. Some of it's about leaning into our ecstasy and our joy and our pleasure and our beauty and remembering that is just as important as the shadow work that we're doing. So I think that what we're bringing up here, Layla, is so crucial for us all to get. So even if you're someone out there who doesn't consider yourself a priestess, I promise you that you're affected by this.
Absolutely. And my own process of healing, I didn't call it a witch wound at the time, but that's now generally what it's called.
If we would give it a name.
I didn't experience it when I was a spiritual practitioner, right? So when I was just living in Asia, doing my spiritual practice, doing my thing, I did not touch this sphere body.
Right.
It was as soon as I had my first big course launch.
Oh, I know.
And I think
Isn't that terrifying?
Yeah.
Oh my God. You like put it out there and you're like, I'm going to run for the hills.
There was, it was so
Whoa.
interesting how it happened for me because it wasn't like a conscious fear of being seen. And I'm only going to articulate this for anyone facing the witch wound, right?
Yeah,
yeah. Because I think the natural question is, well, how do I get through it, right?
Yeah,
like, how do I get to the
course.
other side of it? And for me, what it showed up as was, 650 people, I think, in my first big launch. And I started having these incredible somatic fears of all the ways that violence was perpetrated against women. And it was not a mental experience. It wasn't like I was thinking a lot. It was like some sort of vibration surging through my body. And it was so visceral of exactly what you were talking about, being hunted, being like preyed on, being attacked for being sexual or being feminine or being spiritual. But this was even more in the sexual realm, right? Because my work is so shamelessly in the sexual realm. So it's almost like I felt for the feminine collective every single time that we were targeted for daring to be sexual. And that was coming in these tsunamis and these waves. And the thing that I can say I'm so profoundly grateful for is I had trained in meditation up to that point for probably at least 10 years, if not more. And so I knew what to do with oncoming tsunamis of uncomfortable feelings.
Useful.
Which was
useful.
to meet them, right? Not to go into a big story about it, but to meet them. And it was, I'm not gonna lie, probably 2 or 3 years of terror, like literal, like terror of being by myself, terror of things happening. Like it was very scary. And I remember at the time, Sarita, one of my tantric mentors and teachers, she also said, look, like working with fear is one of the final stages on the spiritual path. Like everybody has to meet fear at some point if they want enlightenment. And so I was so blessed to have that frame because your frame means so much, right? If you start having fears or terrors and you're like, this isn't supposed to happen or something's wrong, right? Then it's very easy to try and hide from it or have your mind tell you stories that can exacerbate it even. Whereas for me, there was this strong sense of, okay, if I have to meet fear one way or another in this reality, like I shall meet it and I shall meet it as deeply as I can while still taking care of myself, resourcing myself, taking lots of baths, right? I would go on Adyashanti's meditation retreats and I would willfully meditate in the forest by myself because I wanted to make it through that terror of being in the forest alone, right? Which to me felt like part of that witch wound, being by yourself, being vulnerable. Like it's like I lost the ability to feel at home in nature, right? And like what has that done to me? And I had one final really powerful moment where I was actually in Joshua Tree, and this is like such a cliche experience, but I had taken LSD. I like told my friends, I was like, I'm crawling out into the desert. Don't come look for me for 2 hours. Like I'm going to be gone. So I went out into the desert and I started to feel the presence of extraterrestrial beings. This is the only time this has ever happened to me in my life.
You'll feel it there if nowhere else. That's for
So
sure.
strong.
Yes, it is.
And I had this really like I wanted to run out of the desert screaming.
Yeah.
And suddenly I had this like sense. I was like, you know what? I am sick and fucking tired as a woman of being terrified to exist on this fucking planet. And like, I'm going to sit here and I will not move and I will crawl around on my hands and feet, but I am not leaving this dark desert until I know that even if this is a world filled with serial killers and alien abductions and fucking sexual violence and perpetrators against women who dare to claim their spiritual sovereignty, I am done living in terror on this planet. Come and fucking get me. And like,
yes.
And I sat there for, I think it was hours, which is a really long time when you're on psychedelics. And I was like, I am not going to run out of this desert afraid, because if I do, I will not come back. And I want to be at home on this planet.
Wow.
And the reason I articulate that is to not have anyone internalize shame if you're not there yet, because that was years of me feeling so scared
like getting a dog, locking the door, being like literally terrified.
Yeah.
And after facing the fear and facing the fear and facing the fear, I just declared, I was like, I am done. And it's not like I'm totally fearless, but something in that terror body broke.
Yes.
And I didn't live feeling like prey anymore. And I claimed something that night that was so powerful.
Yeah.
And so I articulate that for those of us who want to integrate our witch wound, to find our own doorway into that. And for me, sometimes it was letting myself be terrified. Oftentimes it was meeting the terror from meditation and love and connection.
Yeah.
And finally, it was also claiming a new existence, like a new reality for myself. And I've also been humbled that there are layers to this. Right? Every single time that I get invited to do something bigger or speak bigger, oftentimes there's another layer that I have to work with of a new fear or trauma body. And something shifted from bless the aliens, bless the desert. Bless whatever the fuck got into me that night where I was like, I'm not moving.
But what I hear happened for you, and this I think is a part of the process, is you actually commanded yourself to stay present with what was happening. You refused to abandon yourself in that moment. And I think that this is actually part of the massive healing. We cannot abandon ourselves to the ravages of what was if we are seeking to create something new. We have to be present here. That is what, for me, the priestess path is all about. And, the temple I run is called Priestess Presence for a reason. It's about becoming present to this very thing you're talking about. And the other thing I would say about it to anyone who's listening is this is a spiral journey. This is not a destination.
Nope.
We've been sold down the river that you go from A to B to C to D to Z, and that you'll get there on that linear journey. But that's not how the mother works. That's not how the divine feminine works. It is a spiral journey where you will go through many, many layers, like you just said. And every time you come up against the next level of your own initiation in your life to show up more fully, you will be initiated and you will feel that fear body come up again and you'll address it yet again. I just went through it myself last year again, where I was in this amazing body worker that I've been working with. And we were going deep down in, and I was lying on her table. And, and I'd been through a pretty terrifying health crisis last year that had really taken me deep down into the underworld for quite a few months, for like 6-7 months. I was off work for 3 months, and I was really, really dangling my toes in the river Styx. Like I was right there. And as a part of my journey of resurrection, right, it was a death journey. And a part of my resurrection, I started to work with this wonderful woman. I'm lying on her table. And she's working on my body and she's talking to my body, and we're releasing unnamed things, trauma, terror of nearly dying, terror of being so sick, terror of being my mother, terror, just in your body, all the things. And I'm like, how is this all still here? I've been working on this my entire life. How is it possible that there's still so much down there? So I'm lying on her table. I'm super altered. And I suddenly turned to her and I said to her from on the table, I say, is there something burning? There's something burning. And she says to me, no, darling, there's nothing burning in the room. There's no smell of smoke in here. And I went into a full-on body somatic remembrance of being burned. And I could smell it. And they'll tell you that the smell, your nose, is the fastest, deepest memory patterning that we have. It goes straight into the amygdala. And it's where we store our memories, but also store our trauma. And so the smell, that's why oftentimes if you have trauma in your history, smell will trigger it. You'll smell something and you go, oh my God, what is that? As well as it'll remind us of the things we love. Like you'll smell fresh bread and you'll be like, oh, I remember my grandmother. So that experience, I had to stay present with myself in the present moment. But it was another layer of something I was carrying around, the witch wound, but more specifically, the sisterhood wound. And I want to name that with this all because one of the wounds that I think we don't recognize that we have is we're frightened of other women. We're frightened to be in our power because if we're in our power, it means another woman can't be. That's the message we've been given. We're frightened that if we step into our full beauty, that we're going to be judged for it, not by the men, but by the women. We're frightened of being stabbed in the back by them, by being betrayed by them. Why is that? that's because we've internalized the wound that basically said we had no power unless we were married to a rich man, ladies. If we wanted to get somewhere in our lives, we needed to make sure we married that rich man. And if we needed to get that rich man, we needed to be the prettiest, smartest, most beautiful, most erudite, play the piano, crochet, knit, whatever. We had to be able to do all the things to prove that we were worthy of his attention.
And once you got him, you better be sure no other bitch gets a hold of him.
Exactly.
You got to fight them all off.
Exactly, which is what's in the culture. We see it. I mean, it's so in the culture. If any of you watch those reality TV shows, which of course I don't.
Who would be on one? Who would even do such a thing?
I mean, really?
Just going in and poisoning the culture, those reality TV shows.
I mean, no. Never catch me doing anything like that. But if you so happen to, like, perhaps looked at one off the side on someone else's screen.
And then developed an addiction to watching all of them.
Exactly. Then you'll notice that it feeds on that wound, on that competitive wound between women. So that's another way that this plays out. And I think for us to realize that that's what that is, that that's not inherent. We're not inherently trying to undo each other and hate on each other. We're actually more powerful. And this is the really interesting part, is if you've ever gathered with a circle of women, you'll know how powerful it is. And I know you do this all the time, to be with circles of women who are supporting each other to shine, supporting each other to be in our power, and who are all helping one another see our individual genius and beauty as being unique and all needed and all as beautiful as the next, like all the flowers in Mother's garden. There we go, nice little analogy. But the truth is that that wound was deep down in me, Layla. And I had acknowledged it, but what I really realized, and I wonder about you on this level too, is I basically went, you know what, I'm going to go build my own party, and I'm going to build my rules in my world, which is what I've done, where I feel safe, because I'm with women that I want to spend time with, and I'm kind of in charge of the community. So guess what? I feel safer over here, rather than having to be in other places where I didn't feel safe, where I didn't feel seen, where I felt really edgy and challenged. And so I'm realizing at this point in my life, as we all are, right, to get real about what's being put in your way. What are you here now to heal into wholeness? Because we're all on it, honeys. There ain't one of us, and I always say this, your shit don't smell like roses, because it doesn't, and neither does mine. So you know what? We can help one another by actually recognizing that there's a name for this. So whether you call it priestess wound, witch wound, ravages of the patriarchy, I don't care what you call it, but naming a thing has power. When we can name it, see it, and start to actually unearth it, we can return to a position of power.
I'm going to be super real with you. I realized that the number one thing I want in my life is to feel good, right? An amazingly happy life is built on feeling good inside of the nervous system. Those are some of the most challenging feeling states to achieve when we're being bombarded by emails and screen time and overwhelming to-do lists and career and family pressures. And to reset the nervous system to be in its natural state of pleasure and play, that's right, nature actually wanted us to feel pleasurable, playful, sensual. It takes work. Research has shown it can take up to 2 hours to switch from go mode to deep relaxation, where you want to connect and feel good. If you're like me and you don't have 2 hours at the end of the day to meditate, to do yoga, then supplements and plants can actually help your nervous system to feel the ways that you crave. If you're interested in supporting your nervous system to feel the way that you most desire to feel, then go ahead and check out our mood line to shop the entire mood product line and unlock the pleasure you crave.
I'm here to let you know about one of my favorite practices, orgasmic breathwork. So what I've done is I have made 2 different audio guides for people of all genders to train you in how to use breathwork to have more orgasmic sexual experiences. So this breathwork trains you to get out of your head, into your body, to be able to expand pleasure from being localized in your cock or your pussy or intersex genitals into the whole expanse of your body, and to be able to orgasm stronger, longer, and more powerfully. So orgasmic breathwork is one of the most powerful tools that I've ever come across. And you can learn it in a 10-minute guided audio. So you can get it totally for free by downloading it on my website. You can head over to laylamartin.com/orgasmic breathwork. That's laylamartin.com/orgasmic breathwork. You can also find the link down in the show notes. I'm so excited for you to try this practice. It's truly revolutionary and is one of the fastest ways to experience what I'm talking about throughout this podcast, which is a deeper, more potent, more transcendental sexual experience.
I'm so excited to tell you about my sexuality training for men. If you have ever wanted to take your study in Tantra and advanced sexual mastery to the next level, then this training is for you. More and more men are waking up to the fact that there's a whole next level of confidence, pleasure, and power available to them when they step away from relying on things like porn and fantasizing to drive their sexuality, and instead begin to approach both life and sex in a more primal, present, and embodied way. I know that those are the kind of men that I feel most drawn to, but releasing the stories, negativity, and stagnant energy that hold you back from becoming a truly exceptional lover requires what I call the holistic tools of sex. These are practices like breath work, energy activation, sounding, mindfulness, and movement. So I designed this 7-week men's sexual mastery training to train you in all of these tools so you can shift your psychological and energetic approach to sex. This allows your body to last longer, allows you to have multiple orgasms without ejaculation, and to experience flow states during sex. This is all done through powerful 20-minute practices that you can do once a week or daily if you desire. So if you've wanted to train yourself in a program like this to take your sexuality to a whole new level, join me in the Men's Sexual Mastery Training at laylamartin.com/MS. I like that line, like, I'm going to be late to the party because I'm just processing my ravages from the patriarchy.
Well, that's a great way to put it.
Please excuse my tardiness.
Exactly. I'm going to go over here and play.
I'll be in the closet.
Exactly. I'm going to take all my marbles and go in the garden and play on my own.
My priestess wounds.
Exactly.
All right. So that's and thank you for articulating that, because it's easy to look at you and be like, well, she must have finally solved all of it. Look at this, like, elegance and presence and all that. And so I'm always surprised when I deep dive and I'm like, oh shit. Like,
right? Like, really?
It's so much work.
I know. And how is that even possible? I don't get it. Yeah. No. And there's a humility in that, though, which is what keeps it real.
Yeah.
And when people ask me what my path is, I say, I'm on the pathway of love. That's my religion is love. My spirituality is love. I'm on the pathway of love. And to me, the real love is getting in touch with the humility of what it means to be human. The humbleness of what it is to be human. Because you know what? Every one of us has got these places inside of us. Every one of us is attempting to live in a world that's gone mad, that's actually lost its freaking noodle out there. And we're all being faced with how to navigate that. And for me, that human kindness, humility, humble, all come from the same root, which is humus, which is earth, of the earth. I am of the earth. I'm of mother's body. I'm just like you. Guess what? We're all starting from the same place in terms of being human. And we're all struggling with it. It's not easy.
And I think the spiritual misunderstanding that patriarchy sold us was, if you're truly spiritual, it will just be light all the time.
Oh my gosh.
It'll just be heaven all the time.
I must be getting it wrong.
Whereas to me, the goddess traditions, it's an acceptance of light and dark forever, always cycling. And that heaven on earth is falling in love with that, like being in love with the truth.
Exactly. And that place that you just speak to is like, I say that, it's like, can I learn to love my human self and all my foibles and eccentricities and fucked upness and naughtiness and places that I'm envious and hateful and sometimes not my best version of myself. Can I love myself then? Or is it only for when I'm being a good girl? And the truth is that it better not be, because I'm, not always in my good girl self. And I don't imagine you are either. And we've been taught to shame that about ourselves. And for me, the pathway of my spiritual practice has been, how much of my gnarliness can I love? Because you talked about psychedelics earlier on. This was years and years ago. I was on an ayahuasca journey. Oh God. And I am somebody who gets, they in the ayahuasca tradition, everybody, they talk about getting well. Like that's a groovy thing to do, get well.
Yeah.
It actually means you're vomiting your guts up because the medicine is purging and purifying everything out of your system.
I didn't know there was like a term. I heard it recently and someone said it to someone near me and I was like, that's cool.
Getting well.
Yeah, all right.
Okay, I'm getting well. So I haven't done a lot of medicine journeys in my life because they're very, very powerful for me. I'm naturally one of those more open psychic beings. I don't need a lot of help to go to those places. However, I did do this ceremony and I went in with an intention. And the intention was for me, I asked Grandmother Aya, please show me what love is. I want to know what love is. Well, you better be careful what you ask for in that world. So I was inside of this tremendous journey. I won't go into all the details, but suffice it to say that at one point in the journey, I was presented with a huge book. And the book, as I opened it, was basically a record of my life. And it showed me thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of instances when I had been unloving to myself, to another, to the planet, to the dandelion, to you name it, to you know it. And it was, not to say it was horrifying. I mean, it was so humbling because what I realized inside of the journey as I was looking at this, and it was getting more and more subtle and more like into the underbelly of it, like the subtle ways in which I'm not loving, not even the gross ways, the obvious ways. It was all the subtle. And I was like, oh my gosh. Really? Like I'm really a totally unloving person. I kind of thought I was a loving person. Do you know what I mean? Like it totally in my head.
Yeah.
But what was the wake-up call and the initiation about that was it got me to really, really reflect. And that was when I would say that I really stepped onto the pathway of taking the vow to walk as love, which is my spiritual vow, and be in the deep inquiry with myself on the daily basis, which is what I believe. This is why I call myself a Magdalene priestess, and that's the lineage of the Magdalene and Yeshua and that whole beautiful mystery school that they were running before Christianity came into place, which is basically how to be a good, full human. And that's what it's about. It's about what does it mean to walk in a loving way. And it doesn't, and we don't know because we haven't been doing it, loves, because we've not known how to do it. And love isn't what you think it is. And love is many, many things. And it's not one thing. And it looks different every day. What is loving and kind and right? And you have to develop a tremendous muscle of discernment to be able to know what love is. And so I tell that story because, these are the horrifying, wonderful things that we ask for. Say, Mother, please show me the way. And then she goes, here, have a book. Look at all your indiscretions. And from the Judeo-Christian point of view, where that puts me is in hell, right? And basically says, you are irredeemable. You are an evil, bad person. You really are. From the divine feminine perspective, what it says is, and now can you love that? Can you love that back into wholeness in yourself? Because in that act of love, it's transmuted. It's brought back into you. And I think there's no greater thing we need to do on this planet right now than that. We need women and men, but I do believe it's women right now. Sorry to say it, ladies, but I really do. We are calling to awaken, to walk an awakened path of becoming the presence of that love. And when you asked me at the beginning of the interview, what does it mean to be a high priestess? That's what it means for me. It means the dedication to actually being in a practice of saying to myself, well, that wasn't really very loving, was it? Okay, what can I do there? How can I come back in a more magnanimous way, in a kinder way to myself, to the other, whatever? How can I move this situation into something that is more loving for everybody? And that is an art. To be able to do that takes self-mastery, and it takes you knowing yourself. I always think about, I'm sure you know this, but for all of you, there was an inscription above the doorway at the Oracle of Delphi in ancient times. It was at the Temple of Apollo. And the Oracle of Delphi was one of the most famous sibyls out there in history, in her story, sorry. And, you would go to her with your quest. You'd pilgrim to go to her for your quest, and you'd bring your question. And she would go into the nether realms and retrieve, her oracle for you. But written above her door, as you went in to see her, was the words, know thyself. Know thyself. If it was good enough for her, it's good enough for me, right? I mean, it's so simple. It's such a simple invitation and not easy. I'm not going to say that's easy. That requires this work that Layla and I have been talking about where, you're like, oh, holy crap, all of that's down there. But guess what? Not only is all the shadowy, dark stuff down there, all of the other stuff's down there too that you haven't claimed of your jewels and your beauty and your powers and your acidic gifts and all the things that you came in with, that every one of us has come in with. Our shard of genius is also hidden down there. It's not just all your trauma, it's actually all of your potentiality too. And that's what Mother knows. That's what the goddess knows. She knows you have to go down and in to get it. She ain't just giving it away for free. She's not like, oh, just come and have it. She's not standing there go, oh, you did a good job. You get to have this for free. She said, no, you need to do the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like my version of getting handed that book was being shown all the ways that I thought I was being loving, but it was actually just one giant manipulation to egoically still try and get something out of reality. Like I was like, oh, what benevolent actions? And then it was like, here.
Yeah. Oh, how good. It's a good one.
It's still an egoic illusion that you're like operating under. And this to me, when it says know thyself, right? It's like actually be willing to look.
And it's not fun to look sometimes.
It's not always fun. No, sometimes you get all the like superpowers and the multi-orgasmic capacity. And sometimes it's like
in service
you
to
thought
what?
you was a giant operating lie. built on a continued story of unworthiness.
Well, and it's an interesting thing that you say that though, right? Because that's the other thing that we've been taught to do, which is to colonize and basically co-opt and hold hostage our gifts in service to a vision that we didn't even buy into, that we don't even want to be part of.
Yeah.
But we end up using all our power to get that thing that we thought we wanted, which isn't what we actually want.
Yeah.
Which is where you also then wake up going, oh shit, I think I don't want that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not what I meant.
Yeah.
Right. And then you have the wake up call like you had where you're like, oh, but it's all just one big manipulation.
Yeah.
But there's freedom on the other side of that.
Totally. There's also freedom in like not feeling that you have to always be operating. I mean, one of the wisest things that God said to me when I was going through that is I actually was doing a darkness retreat, and there was this amazing healer who had spent all this time in India, and she was giving me these sessions. And at the time when I was telling people this, most people did not want to hear it. Like they didn't. Of course not. No. Like if you're a nice, kind person, like end of story.
They don't want to hear those darker stories.
No, that even that could be a delusion, that what we think is human heart is often ego acting out human heart. And that like it's far more subtle than we could ever imagine.
Yes.
These ways that we operate still in reality from this fundamental delusion that there's something to get rather than like we already are. So seeing that was so profound. And when I went to see her, and I said, I was telling her this, and she said, I had this realization and I was depressed for, I think, a couple of years because I like everything that I thought was so true on the spiritual path, it just got decimated. Yeah. And I was like, well, how do you know? How do you know if you're operating from true love or if you're operating
great question.
From this delusion? And she said, I just assume I'm always in the delusion.
Exactly. Exactly.
And this too is part of the pulsation, I think, of this greater like letting go, because one of my realizations recently as well has been like, yes, the cycle of light and dark, but also it's kind of all happening at the same time.
Exactly.
Like one moment I'm like teaching retreats and it's so grand and I have more energy than I've ever had. And literally like 48 hours later, I'm like dying of COVID on the plane, being like, oh my God, I can't even believe I got on the plane. Like I didn't realize I was this sick. And then like getting off in Houston and like being so sick, I can barely like drag my bags and just like getting taken into this like underworld journey. And then like, as I was going through my fertility journey and doing egg freezing, like some of it was like prayers to the eggs and blessing the medicine and like all this orgasmic power and support from temple priestesses for this egg process. And at the same time, like being so fatigued and, like really long-term illness kind of like takes you to these low places. Yes. So just like eating almond crackers and watching like Hitler documentaries about the Third Reich.
Oh no, don't. You have to stay away from those.
And it wasn't like it was just all dark, like shadow or all light. It was like both at the same time. I was like simultaneously living this like magnificent, like elevated, just like so beautiful. Like it was a sacred egg freezing beyond anything I'd ever known. It was shameless. It was beautiful. It was fertility medicine. It was so magnificent. My partner flew to do it with it. It was just so precious. And then at the same time, there was like this underbelly of like, I'm like so fatigued. And like, I feel like the virus ate my brain and I can't string an English sentence together. And like, it was like all of it. And I think sometimes that's part of it too, is like,
welcome to humanity.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's the realm of the goddess. And when you talk about the realm of the priestess and the whole ancient lineages, and what we're reclaiming is our comfort with the all of it.
Yeah.
That's the piece that I actually really, really feel is so powerful. And when we look at the goddess, she has her dark faces and she has her light faces.
Yeah.
She has the intensity of the Kalima, the Sekhmet, the powerful energies that are destruction, but they're also creation.
Yeah.
You know, that cycle of creation and destruction is what we're designed to do. Hello. You know, if you're in a woman's body, if you're in a female's body, most of us, not all of us, but most of us have been going through a menstrual cycle our entire lives, from puberty up to the faltering madness of perimenopause. You know, and that menstrual cycle is wired into that piece. It's like you're coming up the hill, you're coming to ovulation. World is great. Oxytocin is happening. Estrogen is happening. We love it. Everything's fabulous. You tip over the top of it and you're down the helter-skelter, down into the luteal phase. And now we're like, all my hormones have gone away. The testosterone's coming in. I'm angry. You know, but last week I was so happy and now I'm really angry with the same thing. You know, we're wired for that. And if we would know that, and that's a big part of the goddess remembrance and priestess work, is tuning into that, right, with your work as well. It's like if we can accept that we are all of it, and that just because you're having a fantastic moment, the next moment isn't going to be fantastic. And that doesn't mean you did anything wrong or you're bad. It just means that that's what life does. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, you named it, like I was really, really sick at the end of like more ill than I've ever been. And it was horrifying. It was terrifying. I was in hospital. I didn't want to be in hospital. It was a reckoning. I call it the reckoning. We all get a reckoning at some point.
It's easier if it has a cool name.
It is. Well, it also puts it in a box that you can kind of manage to contain, because you're like, that was the reckoning. Yeah. I'm still in the reckoning, by the way. We're still being reborn from the reckoning. Like I am like clear that I am a nascent human being coming out of the underworld.
Oh, me too. I crawled straight into this interview.
If you could only tell if I wasn't wearing this dress, you'd still see that I'm only just peeking my head out of the underworld, ladies. That's the truth. But the bottom line here is what I can say from true heart and humility at this point in my life is I'm so grateful to have the tools, the sacred technologies, the practices, like you said, the meditation. For me, it's, you know, all kinds of tools and practices that I've learned along the way, mainly to not get stuck in my own storyline, which is the number one tool that we can all give ourselves the favor of, but truly to come into a place where you can actually stay with yourself, whether you're having a fantastic, ecstatic time or you're having a really challenging time, deeply grieving or deeply whatever, on the edge of your insanity. Wherever you are, can you cultivate the ability to stay with yourself there? And that, I think, is what it means to be human. So far, more to come. I've got a few more years on the planet, I'm sure, to investigate this question.
Yay. Well, I didn't get your consent ahead of time. Usually I ask, but we dove into it. This is sex magic. If you're available to having some.
What is it?
So this comes from my supplement company, Mood. And these are aphrodisiacs. So they're all plant-based.
We can have some sex magic right now?
Yes, we can.
Oh my God. It gets better.
So yeah, it's just all amazing botanicals. It's sweetened with monk fruit. It's beet powder that gives it its special purple glow. Yeah.
Holy crap.
It gives you like a tingly, magical feeling.
Okay.
So
a tingly, magical feeling coming right up. Cheers. Here's to tingly magic.
And then when I hear, you can even stir it. Oh, okay, because we mixed them a little while ago.
Okay, well, apparently, do you want to stir me up?
Powerful. Yes, I do.
you like to get your wand?
That is
My
powerful.
thing
All
is
right.
turning.
Let's see, Jameson, if I don't.
Yeah, it's going to go
destroy this whole
everywhere.
thing, yeah.
The whole thing is going everywhere.
Oh, no,
Nope.
we got it. Oh, yeah.
Holy shit. Okay, what's going to happen to us after we've done this, though? Are we going to like,
I mean,
who knows?
who knows?
The living goddess will arrive. As if she hasn't already been here.
Jameson, do we have the other supplements as well? Do we have the capsules? I would totally.
So tell me what this is. Give me the download. Tell me what I'm about to ingest and let me do some magic with it immediately.
I'm excited to tell you about my 6-week self-pleasure training, Obliss. This is the first course I ever made, and it has been going for over 10 years now. Most of us are never taught the tools required to create deeply rooted self-love, which not only leaves us feeling disconnected from our bodies and ourselves, but what a lot of people don't know is that a foundation of self-love is crucial to building the deepest connections and experiencing the most ecstatic pleasure with others as well. My 6-week sexual masterclass for women, Obliss, trains you to have the ultimate orgasm and fall deeply in love with yourself and your body. You'll heal your sexuality, address old wounds, face things like fear, guilt, shame, and shutdown, and be able to heal and integrate them, and discover how to access the deepest, most profound self-love. So whether you're just dipping your toes into the magic of Tantra, or you are a seasoned sacred sexuality practitioner, you can use Obliss to expand your pleasure capacity and to access the most exquisite self-love. You can join Obliss today. You can get started right away at laylamartin.com/Obliss. That's OBLISS, O like orgasm, and then bliss, laylamartin.com/Obliss. It's a really amazing formulation.
So this is a new thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
You're branching out into the world of encouraging us to drink the elixirs.
Totally. Well, you know, it is wild because I did it from surrender. It was like, you're supposed to do this. And so I did. And it seemed like a great idea for a little while. And then I was like, holy shit, I built a second company. What is wrong with me? Like, and then it was just that period of growing something young and nascent. And it was stressful on all levels. And I really questioned, and now it's amazing. It's like, it's launching in Erewhon. We're in talks with like so many stores have wanted it. The sales are skyrocketing. We actually sold out of Sex Magic recently. And it really does feel like it's transmitting the power of plants to be able to shift our mood, but also taking supplements to feel more amazing, to have more fun, and to have better sex. That sexuality is something that you can get physiological, biological support for to be more in states of desire, because it's like society is not going to support you to feel euphoric, sensual, or playful, which is our supplement line.
They're not?
No! They're certainly not going to encourage you to do sex magic. So it's also this really powerful like reclamation of communing with plant consciousness in such a way that you have access to more of these playful states.
Bada bing, bada boom. And there you go, everybody. In case you were wondering. Glad I asked.
You're totally welcome to take these with it. So these stack with sex magic. So this is Euphoria. I'm going to take this one because it's really fun. There's also sensuality
She's
and play.
dropping some euphoria, everybody. Watch out.
It's so good. Woo, because I'm on my second podcast and we got another one to go. So
you really have one more to go. Good God.
Yeah. And then 3 tomorrow because we like.
You pack them in.
We pack them in, especially because I've been on Australia so much this year to be with my beloved. So when I'm here, I'm not here for that long.
So you like get them in the door.
Also, it's Burning Man. So we got to get the show on the road, you know, and get my butt to Burning Man.
Are you going to Burning Man?
I am going to Burning Man.
Oh, good Lord. You are a brave lady. You are a brave lady. Well, cheers.
Cheers. It's a delight to drink this with you.
Wow. Cheers. Yes, no. Burning Man is not in my future. It's in my past.
It's in your past.
It's way in my past. Yeah.
When did you go?
Oh my gosh. I went for like 10 years solid from 1997 until 2007.
What was it like in 1997? I went in 2005 for the first time.
It was rogue. Yeah. Dude, it was rogue.
Yeah.
There was no street lights. There was no streets.
Yeah.
There was just people having orgies in the middle of the desert.
Right?
Essentially. No. It was off the charts.
Totally.
It was people driving very fast across the desert playa. There was no lights. It was just random fires all over the desert with people just being their hedonistic selves. It was something else. And then it turned into this thing. And I was just like, oh, this is now they've got streets and they've got, now they have, I mean, I haven't been in a long time.
There's regulations, you know.
Oh no, I stopped going when they started to put the regulations in place. I was like, you know what, dudes, this beats my point of being here. I'm here to be unregulated and dysregulated and deregulated.
It's a lost art. I actually got into like a minor argument on a WhatsApp group recently, which I try to never do. It's like not the best use of my time.
You don't like to do that?
You know what? It's not what I want at the moment of my deathbed to be like, sure did fight on WhatsApp. Sure did make a few good points on WhatsApp. And like,
cheers then.
But people were all having this thing about like banning electric bikes and stuff like that. And like safety. And like, I fucking get it. And I was like, but I think people forget that Burning Man was created as a middle finger to all the things that would keep us safe.
It was hedonistic to the max.
And you willingly, consensually walked into an environment where no one was creating safety. And that was kind of the point.
It was a bit of a ritual of initiation.
Yeah.
It was scary.
Yeah.
It was intense.
Yeah.
You didn't know what was going to happen.
That was the original initiation.
And it's like everything else. So once we start to codify it, and it's hard, right? Because we understand the need for some structure.
Yeah.
There is some need for some structure,
Totally.
you know? But then it comes a point where the structure starts to take over and it starts to get its little tendrils inside all of the places and start to control it so that it's lost itself. And then the new thing has to happen. I had an innovation around this. I'll just tell you what it is. Well, after, many years of burning the man, I was like, can't we just have another festival or another thing called Wet Women?
Oh, were you the innovator of that? I thought, I've heard Wet Women. It's like genius, but we don't have a real true Wet Woman. Not yet.
Not yet, but we need one.
Yeah.
I mean, we do. I'm looking at one right now.
Getting wetter by the moment.
Exactly. I was going to say, I think after drinking this drink,
I'm just going to be sliding around on the couch.
Exactly. But really and truly, it's like, isn't it time for us to do something that's in a celebration of the feminine, like something that's a sensual delight out there? Like some more, I don't know. Anyway.
Well, it's interesting, the burn it all down mentality versus the build it for a sustainable
let's
future.
Just be in it together and enjoy it.
Totally. All right, let's do a bit of a fire round. I'm going to ask you things that might not be easy to answer quickly.
Oh, I love those.
But you've said a lot of things that I think people want to know more about and that people deserve to know. So
do it.
Mary Magdalene.
Mary Magdalene. Okay. My quick answer to you is we have Mary Magdalene, the historical figure who was around some 2,000 years ago. You might have heard of her, although you might not have because she got excluded and taken out of many of her positions of power. She was basically Jesus's woman. She was teaching alongside him. She was an avatar. She was an incredibly highly initiated priestess, no doubt. And she was the one that actually Christed him. What does that mean? It means that she was the one that anointed him. Prior to her anointing him, laying on of the hands and anointing him with the holy oils, he was simply Jesus of Nazareth. After she anointed him, he became Christ. But he wasn't the only person who was been a Christed being, because Christ actually means anointed one, which means that throughout history and her story, there have been many Christed beings. In fact, I am a Christed being, and probably so are you, and so are many of you who are listening. We're remembering that. So Mary Magdalene comes from a tradition, a long, long lineage of priestesses and women who would have been highly, highly trained. No doubt she was in Egypt and trained there, and no doubt after Jesus' death, she came and traveled in her little boat across to the southern part of France, where she birthed into being the Catholic religion, which is the way of love. So that's a little bit about her. She also became the poster child for the fall of the divine feminine and was projected on shamelessly and made into a prostitute and a whore, which she wasn't. But if you want to know about the word whore, we should go there too, because whore actually means sacred cave. And harlot, which she was also called, means womb of light. All hidden in plain sight, ladies and gentlemen. For your edification. I can't say that word. But there you go. That's my quick blurb on Mary Magdalene, the woman. I've been studying her for a long, long time. She is an incredible, incredible being in our history and her story. And she is well-deserving as perhaps being one of the most revolutionary characters of the last 2,000 years. However, there is also something else I speak about, which is Magdalene, the collective consciousness. Because Magdalene is also not a name, it is a title. Magdalene means tower of strength. watchtower woman. It's also from the root of the word magi or mage, magician, giving a clue away. It's also synonymous with the great cosmic portal, the tree of life. She who stands between the worlds, she who is the portal. So the Magdalene isn't just about a woman in history or her story. It is actually a denomination, a term for one who is able to travel between the realms. She has the self-mastery to be able to go back to the other side and bring herself here again. She encompasses the divine and the human. And so for me, the rise of the interest in the Magdalene at this particular moment in our evolution is because we are remembering what it is to be women who can travel between the realms and who can stand in the fullness of who we are. The Magdalene is guiding us, the consciousness of the Magdalene. And we are here to be the watchtower women who say, not on my watch. This doesn't happen anymore.
High Priestess, mic drop. Also, everywhere they translated the word prostitute into English from the original Aramaic Bible, it actually meant High Priestess.
Thank you.
High Priestess speed round. Number 2, tell us about the Celts.
Oh my good God. Oh my good God. Okay. Tell us about the Celts in under 30 seconds. All right. In essence, the Celts were the ancient peoples, the indigenous religion, spirituality of the Great British Isles, but not just the Great British Isles, Scotland, Ireland, England, Wales, but also over into southern France, northern France. There were
Germany.
And some Germany,
Yeah.
exactly. There were literally hundreds and hundreds of tribes of Celts from all different places. They were an egalitarian society. Men and women ruled together. Women were trained in the sacred arts of hunting and warfare and protection. Men were trained in the sacred arts of taking care of children. They ruled together. Women were included in their political power. They were able to be in positions of leadership. One of the most famous Celtic women that we know of is Boudica, who was the queen of the Iceni Celts. And a little unknown fact here, I'm related to Boudica. Yes, I am. Isn't that bizarre? She was a red-headed goddess, as am I. My family lineage comes from East Anglia. And if any of you know that you can do a DNA search, you might not know that you can do an ancient history DNA search that compares your DNA to all of the archaeological sites around the world. You will then find out who your ancient tribal sisters, mothers, brothers were. Yeah. Just so happens that Boudica is one of mine.
Ooh.
Go there. Surprise, surprise. I mean, I was not surprised when I found out. So Boudica was the woman who was in charge of her people. She was the queen of the Iceni Celts, and she was the last Celtic tribe to exist in England that was defeated, sadly, by the Romans when they what did they do? They came in. What's that word? When you invade. Thank you. There's a word there. When they invaded, and she stood up to them and she called over 10,000 men to come and follow her to fight off the Romans. They did not succeed. And sadly, they did the dishonor of raping her 2 daughters in the street and of beating her and killing her in front of her people. But the Celts are deeply ingrained in the culture of Western Europe. And perhaps if you have Western European DNA, there is no doubt that you are in some percentage Celtic. Mm. One of the things you need to know about the Celtic priestesses is they were called the Banderai. Mm. And the Banderai priestesses served alongside the male Druid priests and were equal in status. And they were found in the deep forests, and they would work with the power of the trees and the mushrooms particularly. And did I mean magic mushrooms? Probably. Mm. Celtics. Lots to be said about them.
Oh, High Priestess mic drop. All right.
She's giving it to me.
It's so good. It's so good. High Priestess speed round question number 3.
Yes.
You said one of the most powerful practices of a high priestess was to not get caught in your story.
Ooh.
How do you do that?
Empty presence. Dun, dun, dun. Cultivating a...
Go on.
Oh my God.
Go on.
Okay.
Give me emptier.
Yes, exactly, darling. It's the practice of being able to empty out your vessel. So whatever that means, to let go of the mind to the degree that you can become the hollow reed, right? But it's not just becoming the hollow reed. It's not just settling the nervous system so that we can become present. It's emptying the vessel out so that we have space to be filled with the numinous, with the omnipotent, with the divine. We can actually become a vessel to it, but it's a practice to be empty and present. And what we say in the lineages that I'm trained in, and one of them is the 13 Moon Mystery School lineage, which was founded by Ariel Spilsbury, who's my fairy godmother and initiator. And she would always say to me, Kalila, a 13 moon priestess is able to move in the world in empty presence, responding to the situation at hand in the requiredness of the moment with whatever face of the goddess is needed. So it's becoming a vessel to the higher knowing, to your divine knowing, and being in service to that rather than your egoic knowing. So it gets you to do some pretty crazy stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it does. It does. It gets you to do things that your ego goes, I'm not doing that. And your higher self says, oh yeah, you are. You're going to say that to that person. You are. You're going to walk right over to them right now. And that's empty presence at work.
Yes.
Coming from a higher order or a higher knowing and filtering down into our little old boots on the ground.
All right, final question in the High Priestess speed round.
Oh
I'm sure many...
We're like a new reality TV show here.
Totally. Show us the way to enlightenment in 25 seconds or less.
Exactly. Soundbite.
I mean, I'd love to see that on Netflix. Like the
frankly,
high stakes
yes.
competition for who can become more enlightened wins the pot of like $200,000.
Hysterical. That's even better. Even better.
Honestly, I think Ronnie's the spiritual bypasser.
Exactly. He's just saying that.
Yeah. He's just performing with his mala. He's not really feeling the impulse of the sacred divine through his being and surrendering to it beyond his ego.
Oh my God.
All right.
You need to narrate that show. Final question.
Many people who are listening to this are probably thinking, I feel like a high priestess. I have a witch wound and I want to be more. I want to be more of my high priestess, more in my power, more seen, more in my ritual. How do I do that?
Well, I'm a stickler on this level, darlings, and you are too. It takes training. I don't care what innate gifts you have. I haven't gotten to where I've gotten without training my ass off. Yeah. And so have you. And being initiated and going through the steps and being humble enough to say, I don't know what I'm doing. Please show me the way. And not looking for someone else to show you the way, but looking for your direct connection to the goddess or the gods to show you the way. But usually, you know, in antiquity, priestesses would go into the temple and be trained for 13 years before they were allowed out into their communities. They'd have to serve in every of the 13 temples of the goddess and learn about how to hone themselves and their skill set to be of service. So like anything else in this world, how do you become a virtuoso musician? You have raw talent. What do? You go out and you seek somebody to mentor you and train you in how to become the virtuoso, how to let that blossom within you. It's no different. In this plane of reality, darlings, you have to train it and practice it and do due diligence and actually study. There is no shortcut.
This is in your empty bathtub.
You sit in your empty bathtub, or you go deep into the woods or the middle of the desert at night and face your fears.
Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes.
Yeah.
And usually you are held to account by a community of others who can initiate you and say, you're bullshitting yourself or you seem clear. Because guess what? We sometimes don't know because we're so sophisticated at bullshitting ourselves, as you all know. Yeah. So my short answer to that is for anyone who really wants to do that, then find the training, find the place that works for you, find the person that you feel holds the transmission and go be with them, go learn from them, go be with them in their energy. It'll awaken yours. Yes.
Thank you so much. This has been such a deep remembrance delight.
I know, really. We've been quite effervescent. We've done it all today.
Yeah, we have.
We've gone from the real deep down there troughs to the high ecstasy and everything in between. And that is the transmission of what it means to be a priestess, y'all. It may not be in the words that we said, but travel the energetic current of where we've been. That will tell you more about what it means.
So we'll include everywhere that people can follow you, find you, do your programs, in the show notes and the links everywhere. Is there anything you specifically want to tell people about that you're doing?
Yeah, well, enrollment is opening. We have 2 mystery schools that run concurrently with one another. One is in the mystery school of the Magdalene and the ancient miraphors and the scent anointers and the laying on of hands and the death rites and all of that. That's the Rosa Mystica mystery school. The other one is the 13 Moon mystery school lineage. It's called the Quintessia mystery school, and it's a deep study in the art of being an alchemical priestess and really learning how to be a modern day alchemist. Both of those are opening up for enrollment really soon. We open up every fall. We begin again in the new year in a new cohort of sisters who are traveling this path. And so that's what I'm up to. I'm preparing school. It's, I say it's Hogwarts for priestesses. That's what it is. And, it's a place to come and really be with others who are dedicated to this path and are curious and want to develop the skill set. So that's what most of my life's about.
Thank you so much.
Yay, yay, yay. Oh, thank you. This was more than delightful. And thank you for who you stand as in the world. I know it's a lot of fun that you get to have, but I also know that it's been a lot of personal work and a lot of sacrifice and a lot of looking at stuff that hasn't been easy and holding spaces for women to look at stuff that's not easy as they reclaim their power and their ecstasy. So thank you for that. Really, I really, really value what you do in the world. And I'm grateful that you're here doing it.
Oh.
Quick wiggle of happiness. We're doing a quick wiggle of happiness over here.
Yay.
Blessings. And for all of you who've been listening, from my heart to yours, may you continue on your path of awakening to your heart, to your greater than imagined possibilities. May you be blessed. May you travel and be greeted with love and blessings wherever you go. And may you find the spark of genius within you. And may you follow that.
Thank you for listening to this Tantric Life. I am Layla Martin. This is the home for the realist conversations about sex, spirituality, polarity, conscious relationships, and all kinds of topics that help us live the absolute most incredible lives. Please check out the next episode. Please go ahead and leave your rating and review on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. It's so helpful when you do that. If you want to stay connected to me, the most helpful supportive thing you can do is to head over to laylamartin.com, sign up with your email address. That connects you to me if you want to study deeper with me, if you want to receive my deeper teachings. I do it predominantly via email. Finally, you can check me out on Instagram at @the Layla Martin. And thank you so much for being here.